You don't belong here!
She was still pointing when the little girl looked up. Not at him, not at the groceries scattered across the hot Dallas asphalt, the oranges rolling slowly toward a storm drain, the paper bag ripped clean down the side, the box of dinosaur cereals sitting upright like it had decided to simply watch. She was pointing at Marcus Webb like he was something she had the right to remove, like he was an inconvenience that had wandered into the wrong zip code and someone needed to say it out loud. "You don't belong here," Sandra Holloway said. Her voice was loud enough to carry across 2 lanes of parked cars, loud enough to make a woman with a cart full of groceries stop walking, loud enough that the teenager bagging carts near the entrance pulled out his phone without fully deciding to. "And you certainly don't belong raising a child in this neighborhood." Marcus did not move. He stood 6 feet tall in a plain denim shirt with his daughter Zoe pressed against his leg, her arms wrapped around his thigh. Her face turned away from the woman, not because she was afraid, but because at 6 years old, she had already learned the instinct her father had spent a lifetime perfecting. You do not give that kind of anger what it wants. Behind Sandra, her husband Craig stood with his arms crossed and his jaw forward, broadcasting the specific energy of a man who has never once been told he was wrong by anyone he respected. 12 people were watching, more arriving every second. And not one of them, not Sandra, not Craig, not a single person holding up a phone in that Kroger parking lot on Preston Road, had any idea who Marcus Webb was, what he had survived, what he had sacrificed, or what was about to happen in the next 7 minutes that would end 2 lives as those people knew them, and quietly, permanently, change one little girl's understanding of what her father was made of. This story did not begin in that parking lot. It began 38 years earlier, in a delivery room in Memphis, Tennessee, with a boy who was born into a world that had already decided what to think of him, and spent the rest of his life proving every single part of that wrong. Before we go any further, hit subscribe right now and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from. This story is just getting started. Marcus Jerome Webb was born on March 4th, 1984, in a 2-bedroom house on Valentine Avenue in North Memphis, Tennessee, to a mother who worked double shifts at a laundry facility 6 days a week, and a father who left before Marcus was old enough to remember his voice. He grew up in a neighborhood where ambition was treated as a kind of arrogance, where wanting more than what was in front of you was considered a betrayal of something unspoken. He learned early that the world was not going to make room for him. He was going to have to build the room himself. He enlisted in the United States Army at 22, trained as a combat medic at Fort Sam Houston, and served 2 deployments in Afghanistan between 2006 and 2010. He kept men alive in conditions that could not be described in polite company. He made decisions in a space of seconds that other people never face in a lifetime. In March 2009, outside Kandahar, a roadside device detonated 30 feet from the vehicle he was riding in. The soldier beside him took the worst of it. Marcus pulled him behind cover, applied a tourniquet with one hand while returning radio contact with the other, and kept him conscious until the medevac arrived. The soldier's name was Private First Class Kevin Okafor. He lost 2 fingers on his right hand. He did not lose his life. Marcus received the Purple Heart 6 weeks later. He kept it in a shoebox under his bed for 2 years before Diane made him put it on the wall. Diane. That was the part of the story that changed everything else about every other part. He had met her in 2013 at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School, where he was pushing through his first year on a GI Bill scholarship, and she was finishing her residency in pediatric oncology. She was from Houston. She laughed too loudly in quiet places and cried at commercials, and had an opinion about everything that she delivered with a gentleness that made disagreeing with her feel like a personal failure. They were married in June 2015. Zoe arrived in January 2017. In September 2021, Diane went to the doctor about a pain she had been quietly carrying for 3 months without telling Marcus. She already knew, she said later. She had known for a while. She just had not been ready to hand him that weight until she had no other choice. She was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer on a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus drove home from the hospital, sat in the driveway for 11 minutes, then went inside and made Zoe her dinner and read her a story and held it together with both hands until Zoe was asleep. Then he sat on the kitchen floor with his back against the cabinet and stayed there until the sun came up. Diane died 14 months later on a Wednesday morning in January 2023. She was 36 years old. Marcus was 38. Zoe had just turned 6. 7 months after Diane's funeral, Marcus had rebuilt a version of routine from the wreckage of what their life had been. He woke at 5:15 every morning. He made Zoe's lunch the night before. Always a note tucked inside, a small drawing of something that had made him think of her during the day. He dropped her at school, drove to Dallas Medical Center, and worked the hours that needed working. He did not complain. He did not explain himself to anyone. He simply carried what he was carrying and kept moving, because Zoe was watching him carry it, and that mattered more than anything else. Saturday grocery runs were the one thing he had not changed. Diane had started them. Every Saturday morning, she and Zoe would take the cart together, Zoe standing on the bottom bar and holding the handle, going up and down every aisle without a list, picking things that looked interesting. It was inefficient and unhurried, and Marcus had never once suggested they do it differently. After Diane died, he kept doing it exactly the same way. Not because it erased the absence, because Zoe still stood on the bottom bar, still held the handle, and he was not going to take that from her on top of everything else. On August 12, 2023, they had been in the Kroger on Preston Road for 40 minutes. Zoe had found the dinosaur cereal on the bottom shelf and held it up to him with both hands, the way she held things she wanted very much, and he had said yes without looking at the price. They were walking back to the car when Sandra Holloway's cart swung wide on the turn between the rows and caught the side of Marcus's grocery bag at full speed. The bag tore down the seam. Groceries hit the asphalt. Marcus crouched immediately to gather what he could. He was checking the eggs, 3 cracked, 5 intact, when Sandra spoke. "You should watch where you're going." He looked up. She was not crouching to help. She was standing over the mess, with her hands loose at her sides, wearing the expression of someone who has never once considered that they might be the one at fault. "Your cart hit my bag," Marcus said evenly. Sandra's eyes moved to Zoe, then back to Marcus, then performed a slow, deliberate scan of him. Shoes, jeans, face, the way some people do when they are rearranging someone into a category. "Well," she said, "maybe if you paid more attention to what you were doing instead of dragging that child through a parking lot." "She's with her father," Marcus said, "running errands on a Saturday, same as anyone else here." Sandra's chin lifted. Something shifted behind her eyes. A door opening onto something uglier than a parking dispute. "People like you," she said, letting the phrase hang deliberately, "always have an excuse." The woman 2 rows over had stopped walking. The teenager near the cart return had his phone out. Zoe had stopped trying to pick up the orange she was holding and had pressed herself back against Marcus's leg. And then Craig Holloway appeared from between 2 parked cars, drawn over by the sound of his wife's voice at its particular pitch. The one he had learned meant she had found a target and was not finished with it yet. If a man like Marcus deserves dignity in a parking lot, and he does, hit subscribe and stay with this story. It is about to crack wide open. Craig Holloway was not a small man, 6'2", broad through the shoulders, the kind of build that had probably been impressive at 30 and had softened into something that still took up space at 53. He walked over with the unhurried confidence of someone who had never needed to rush, because his presence alone had always been enough to change the temperature of a room. He took in the scene in 2 seconds: his wife, the scattered groceries, the black man crouching on the asphalt, the little girl pressed against his leg, and his jaw set in the way it did when he had already decided on the conclusion before hearing a single fact. "What's going on?" he said, directing the question at Sandra and no one else. "He knocked into me," Sandra said, "and now he's being aggressive about it." Marcus stood slowly. He held the egg carton in one hand. His voice when he spoke was the voice he used in trauma bays when everything was going wrong, and the worst thing he could do was let anyone in the room feel the weight of it. "Your wife's cart tore open my grocery bag. I ask her to acknowledge that. That's the full extent of what has happened here." Craig looked at him for a long moment. Then, "You need to watch your tone." "I don't have a tone," Marcus said. "I have a 6-year-old and a torn bag and 3 cracked eggs. I'd like to get my daughter home." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you started running your mouth at my wife." Zoe tugged once at Marcus's sleeve. He reached down without looking and put his hand briefly on the top of her head, a small, automatic gesture, the kind that happens 10,000 times in a childhood and gets remembered forever. That was when Sandra made the decision that destroyed everything she had built. She turned to face the crowd that had gathered. 15 people now, several with phones raised, a full semicircle of strangers witnessing something that had grown well past a parking dispute. And she raised her voice to make sure every single one of them could hear what came next. "Somebody needs to call the police," she announced. "This man is threatening us. He knocked into me. He's been aggressive with my husband, and I don't feel safe." The silence that followed was the particular kind that happens when a crowd collectively understands that they have just watched something be constructed in real time. 3 people lowered their phones. Several did not. One woman near the cart return said something quiet to the man beside her, and he shook his head slowly. Marcus did not react. He stood exactly where he was, egg carton in hand, his daughter at his side, and waited. 2 Dallas PD officers arrived in 4 minutes from the unit parked at the gas station on the corner of Preston and Forest Lane. Officer Daniel Reyes stepped out first, took a 3-second read of the scene the way officers are trained to. Crowd, then principals, then the child, and then his eyes landed on Marcus, and stayed there. He stopped walking. "Dr. Webb?" The crowd heard it. Sandra heard it. Craig's mouth opened by approximately half an inch, and did not close again for a very long time. Officer Reyes's partner, Tanya Frost, came around the front of the squad car and looked at Marcus, then at Reyes, then back at Marcus, with the expression of someone doing rapid arithmetic. "Wait," she said under her breath. "That's Dr. Webb?" Sandra's head turned toward her husband. Craig was no longer looking at Marcus. He was staring at Reyes with the fixed, unblinking expression of a man whose entire internal architecture was being quietly demolished. Because Craig Holloway knew that name. He had heard it once before, 6 months ago, in a waiting room on the 3rd floor of Dallas Medical Center, when a surgeon in scrubs had walked out at 2 in the morning and told him that his brother's heart had been stabilized and that Kevin was going to be all right. Craig had not seen the surgeon's face clearly. He had been crying too hard to focus. He had shaken the man's hand and said thank you 3 times, and the surgeon had said it was his job and walked back through the doors. He was looking at that surgeon right now, standing in a parking lot, holding a carton of eggs, with his 6-year-old daughter pressed against his leg. The video was 53 seconds long at the moment it mattered most. It opened on Sandra mid-sentence, finger extended, voice carrying cleanly across the parking lot. It caught Marcus standing still, egg carton in hand, Zoe pressed against his leg. It caught Craig's jaw dropping at the sound of his name from Officer Reyes. And it ended on Sandra's face in the 3 seconds after, the color draining, the finger slowly lowering, the particular expression of a woman watching the ground disappear from underneath everything she had built her confidence on. By Sunday morning, it had 6 million views. By Monday afternoon, it had been covered by 4 national news outlets, shared by 2 sitting U.S. congresswomen, and had generated a segment on CNN that ran without commercial interruption for 11 minutes. The Chiron read, "Army veteran and trauma surgeon publicly shamed in Dallas parking lot while his 6-year-old daughter watched." Sandra and Craig Holloway were identified before midnight Saturday. Craig's employer, a commercial real estate development firm headquartered in Plano, released a statement by 9 o'clock Sunday morning, confirming he had been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full internal review. Sandra's interior design business, which had operated for 11 years out of a studio in Highland Park, went dark on Monday. The website returned a single line, temporarily closed. The phone rang unanswered for 4 days before the number was disconnected entirely. Their neighborhood, the one Sandra had told Marcus he did not belong in, became the place they could no longer leave without being recognized. A neighbor 2 doors down gave a brief interview to a local Dallas station. She chose her words carefully. She said she was not surprised. Marcus gave no statement. Dallas Medical Center's communications office released 2 sentences confirming his employment and requesting privacy for the family. He did not respond to interview requests. He did not post anything. He took Zoe to her Saturday morning dance class the following weekend, sat in the same plastic chair he always sat in, watched her through the glass window the way he always did, and did not look at his phone once. On Thursday, Craig Holloway called Dallas Medical Center and asked to leave a message for Dr. Webb. The receptionist who took the call said later that he sounded like a man who had not slept in several days. The message was 4 sentences. He was sorry. He had been wrong. His brother Kevin had watched the video and could not stop crying. And Craig said he would understand completely if Marcus never responded. Marcus received the message Friday afternoon between a 9-hour surgery and a family consultation in the ICU waiting room. He read it twice. He set his phone face down on the break room table, and he sat with it in the particular silence of a man deciding not what to do, but when. If this story is hitting you the way it should, subscribe, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and keep watching. The most important moment is still coming. Craig Holloway arrived at Dallas Medical Center on a Tuesday morning, 17 days after the parking lot. He came alone. He had not told Sandra he was coming, and he had not told Kevin either, because this was not something he could explain to anyone before he had done it. He wore a plain white button-down shirt, no jacket, no watch, nothing that suggested he was anything other than a man who had decided to walk into a building and do the hardest thing he had ever done. He told the front desk receptionist his name. He said he was there to see Dr. Marcus Webb. He said he did not have an appointment. He said he understood completely if the doctor was unavailable, and that he would wait as long as necessary, and that he was not leaving until he had said what he came to say. Marcus came down 23 minutes later in his white coat, badge clipped to the pocket, a coffee cup in his left hand. He looked exactly the same as he had in the parking lot, composed, unhurried, carrying nothing extra on his face. Craig stood up from the waiting room chair. He was a large man, and standing did not make him look powerful the way it usually did. It just made him look exposed. He opened his mouth, and what came out was not the speech he had rehearsed in the car on the drive over. It was not organized or articulate or anywhere close to adequate. It was just, "My brother would be dead without you. And I stood in a parking lot and said things that His voice broke directly in the middle of the sentence. He pressed his lips together and looked at the floor and tried to locate the rest of the words. He could not find them. Marcus looked at him for a moment. Then he said, quietly, "How is Kevin doing?" Craig blinked hard. Of everything he had prepared for, he had not prepared for that. He's good, he managed. He's really good. Marcus nodded once and extended his hand. Marcus Webb gave one interview, a single piece published in the Dallas Morning News on September 14th, 2023, 3 weeks after the parking lot and 1 week after the lobby. The reporter asked him what he wanted people to understand about what had happened. He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "My daughter was standing right there the entire time, from the first word that woman said to the moment those officers arrived. Zoe saw all of it, and I knew she was watching. Every single choice I made in that parking lot, I made because she was pressed against my leg, looking up at me, learning what her father was made of." He paused. "She needed to see that your dignity does not require anyone's permission, that you do not have to prove your worth before you are allowed to be treated as a human being. But she also needed to see what it looks like to walk through something designed to break you and come out the other side without becoming it." The article was read by 3 million people in the first 48 hours. Every Saturday, Marcus and Zoe still run their groceries. No list, every aisle. Zoe still stands on the bottom bar of the cart and holds the handle with both hands. Tied to the corner of that handle is a small yellow ribbon, Diane's favorite color, that Zoe put there herself the Saturday after the parking lot. She has retied it every week since, without being asked. Marcus has never asked her why. Some things do not need words. Some people do not need to explain themselves. They simply live in a way that makes the explanation unnecessary. If this story moved you, subscribe, leave a comment below, and share this with one person who needs to hear it today.